Ty and I are having a legal wedding.
You and Ty are getting married.
Wait, Ty and I are getting married.
Wait,
These bombs just keep dropping.
I got pregnant right around the first time we had sex.
Wow.
And Daniel didn't want anybody to know.
Can you have two masters at a time?
Huh?
Can you have two masters at a time?
What the hell?
You're not her master. I'm having this curse broken by a church, and I'm going to be cleansed and blessed and prayed over. I'm looking forward to having the life I've always wanted.
Lisa's story did not begin with a normal breakup, and it did not begin with two people simply falling out of love. Because before anyone could even understand what was happening between her and Daniel, the tell-all dropped the kind of reveal that changes the whole meaning of the relationship. The arguments, the fear, and even the way Faith looked at everything from the outside. Lisa was pregnant with Daniel's child, and this was not some simple private detail thrown into the conversation for shock value, because according to what was revealed, the pregnancy became dangerous, medically serious, and emotionally isolating, especially after Lisa explained that because of her past surgery, the pregnancy could not continue safely and turned into a situation where her own health was at risk. That alone would have been heavy enough, but what made it feel even darker was not just the pregnancy itself, it was the secrecy around it. Because Lisa said Daniel did not want Faith to know, and that one detail suddenly made the whole relationship feel less like messy romance and more like something built around fear, control, and silence. Faith is not just a side character in this story, she is Lisa's daughter. The person who should have been there during one of the scariest moments of her mother's life, yet Lisa said she went through it without letting Faith support her because she was afraid of how Daniel would react, and that is where the emotional center of this whole situation starts to shift. Because when someone is bleeding, scared, and facing a medical emergency, the question is no longer who loves who more, who said what online, or who owes who loyalty. The question becomes much more basic and much more painful. Who was actually protecting Lisa when Lisa needed protection the most? Daniel's side was that he had been blocked, that he could not be there in the way he wanted because access had been cut off, but Lisa pushed back against that version and said he simply was not there when she needed him, and once those two versions were placed next to each other, the audience was left with a very uncomfortable gap. Was Daniel truly shut out, or was Lisa abandoned in the moment when the relationship was supposed to prove itself? That is the part that makes this more than just another tell-all argument. Because Lisa was not only describing a breakup, she was describing the moment she realized the person who had such a strong grip on her emotions might not have been capable of showing up when the situation became real. And then Lisa said something that felt like a turning point, because she started talking like someone who had finally found her voice, someone who was tired of being pushed down, tired of being told who she could be, tired of living under the pressure of Daniel's words, Daniel's beliefs, and Daniel's claim that she was still tied to him through that traditional ceremony in Nigeria. But even that strength does not feel simple, because Lisa has looked controlled before, Lisa has looked convinced before, and Lisa has also looked like someone who can become emotionally attached very fast when someone makes her feel seen, supported, or rescued at the right moment. So the real question is not only whether Lisa is done with Daniel, because on that stage she sounded done. The real question is whether Lisa is finally standing on her own, or whether the strength everyone is seeing is being pulled from another relationship waiting just behind the curtain. And that is where the story becomes even more complicated. Because just when it seems like Lisa has finally broken away from Daniel, another man from Nigeria enters the picture. And suddenly Daniel is no longer the only person shaping Lisa's next move. And just when Lisa's story looked like it was becoming a clean escape from Daniel, the whole situation shifted again. Because Lisa did not simply walk away from Daniel and choose time, space, healing, or silence, she revealed that there was already someone else in the picture, another Nigerian man named Ty, and according to Lisa, this was not some random stranger who suddenly appeared after everything fell apart. This was someone she described as her friend. Someone who had been there during the moments when Daniel was causing pain, confusion, and pressure. At first, the way Lisa explained Ty made him sound like emotional support. The person she could talk to when everything with Daniel became too heavy. The person who listened when she felt alone. And the person who made her feel seen at a time when she believed Daniel was not protecting her. But the second Ty entered the story, the audience had to ask a harder question. Because support can feel comforting, but support can also become attachment very quickly when someone is wounded, scared, and desperate to feel safe again. Lisa said Ty was her best friend before he became something more, and on the surface, that sounds simple, even healthy. Because after what she said she experienced with Daniel, it makes sense that she would be drawn towards someone who felt calmer, kinder, and easier to trust. But then the timeline started to make everything less clean. Because Ty had apparently been commenting on Lisa's social media videos before the relationship changed, and after one of Lisa's fights with Daniel, she turned to Ty to get his opinion as a Nigerian man. That detail matters, because it means Ty was not just a new chapter after the storm had ended. He was someone standing near the edge of the story while the storm was still happening, and once Lisa began leaning on him, the line between friendship and emotional connection became much harder to define. Lisa insisted that nothing inappropriate was happening at first, and from her side, the connection was normal conversation, a friend helping her understand what she was going through. But Daniel saw it differently, and in Daniel's mind, Lisa was not simply moving on, she was betraying him while he still believed she was tied to him. That is where the conflict became more complicated. Because if Lisa truly believed the relationship with Daniel was over, then her connection with Ty would look like a woman trying to rebuild her life. But if Daniel truly believed the traditional marriage still meant something, then every message, every emotional conversation, and every private exchange with Ty became proof, at least to him, that Lisa had crossed a line. And then Daniel raised the accusation that pushed the whole discussion into more uncomfortable territory, claiming that Lisa and Ty had seen each other naked, which Lisa did not fully deny, but she argued that anything intimate happened after she and Daniel had already split, and that one difference in timing became the center of the fight. Because Lisa's defense depends on one thing being true, that she had already ended things with Daniel before Ty became anything more than a friend, but Daniel refuses to accept that ending, and that refusal turns the whole situation into a battle over who gets to decide when a relationship is truly over. That is why Ty's arrival does not feel like a simple rescue story, even if Lisa wants it to. Because Ty may have supported her when Daniel made her feel trapped, but the timing also raises the possibility that Lisa did not fully heal before attaching herself to someone new, and that makes Faith's position even more important. Because Faith may approve of Ty, but approval does not erase the risk of Lisa rushing into another emotionally intense relationship before she has fully separated from the last one.
So now the audience is not only watching Lisa choose between two men, they are watching her choose between freedom and another fast emotional commitment. And the most troubling part is that Daniel still does not see this as Lisa's choice at all. Because in his mind, Lisa is still his traditional wife, and Ty is not just a new boyfriend, he is the man stepping directly into a claim Daniel refuses to release. Daniel's reaction to Lisa moving on was not the reaction of someone who simply felt hurt by a breakup. It sounded like someone who did not accept that a breakup had even happened, because every time Lisa tried to separate herself from him, Daniel kept pulling the conversation back to the same claim that they were,
and that Lisa could not just walk away because he had not agreed to let the relationship end. That is what made this part of the tell-all feel so tense, because Lisa was not only trying to explain that she had lost love for Daniel, she was trying to prove that her own decision still mattered, and when she told him to let her go, the whole room could feel the pressure behind those words. Because this was no longer a simple argument about cheating, jealousy, or hurt feelings. This was about whether Lisa had the right to decide that the relationship was over. Daniel's language made everything even more uncomfortable, because he kept speaking as if Lisa still belonged inside the relationship no matter what she said, and when someone talks that way, the emotional question becomes bigger than romance, because love has to involve choice, and Daniel's side of the story sounded less like mutual love and more like possession, tradition, and refusal. Lisa's position was clear on the surface. She said she was done. She said she did not want Daniel as a master, and she said she wanted to move forward with Ty, but even that escape did not feel completely clean, because the audience already knew Lisa was not stepping into a quiet season of healing, she was stepping straight into another serious connection with another man from Nigeria, and that made the whole room feel split between relief and concern. On one side, it was easy to understand why people wanted Lisa away from Daniel, because after the pregnancy reveal, the secrecy around Faith, the fear, and Daniel's constant insistence that the traditional marriage still controlled the situation, Lisa leaving him felt like the first clear step toward freedom. But on the other side, The speed of Ty entering the story made the same freedom feel unstable, because escaping one intense relationship by running into another intense relationship can look brave in the moment and dangerous once the emotions settle. Ty's role became critical because he did not just sit quietly as Daniel made his claim. He stepped in and argued that the traditional marriage had no legal backing, which gave Lisa the permission she was already trying to claim for herself, but that also placed Ty in a complicated position, because while he may have been defending Lisa's right to move on, he was also the person who benefited most if everyone accepted that Daniel no longer had any claim at all. That is why the triangle felt so messy, because Daniel's motive looked tangled in control and denial, Lisa's motive looked tangled in escape and hope, Ty's motive looked tangled in support and self-interest, and Faith's concern sat underneath all of it like the only voice trying to slow the situation down before another life-changing decision was made too quickly. Faith could approve of Ty and still worry about the pattern, because those two things can be true at the same time, and that is where Lisa's story became harder to watch, because Faith was not only reacting to one man, she was reacting to years of watching her mother get pulled into emotional situations that became bigger, faster, and more painful than they needed to be. Then Lisa said the part that changed the whole direction of the story, because this was not just about dating Ty, not just about proving Daniel wrong, and not just about moving emotionally forward. She was planning to go back to Nigeria and marry Ty legally, which meant the fight with Daniel was no longer about whether Lisa could leave the past, it was about whether Lisa was about to build her future on another decision made under pressure. Faith's warning is the part of this story that makes everything feel heavier, because while Lisa is standing on that stage trying to explain why Ty feels different from Daniel, Faith is the one watching the pattern from the outside, and she is not reacting like someone who simply dislikes her mother's choices. She is reacting like someone who has already seen what happens when Lisa moves too fast, trusts too deeply, and then gets left dealing with the emotional wreckage afterward. That is why Faith's concern cuts through the noise, because she is not fighting Daniel for control, she is not trying to compete with Ty, and she is not trying to embarrass Lisa in front of everyone. She is trying to slow her mother down before another major decision becomes another painful chapter that everyone else saw coming, except the person living inside it. Lisa says she wants a healthier life, and after everything that happened with Daniel, that desire makes sense, because anyone watching this can understand why she would want distance, peace, support, and a relationship that does not make her feel trapped. But the problem is that Lisa's version of healing still seems tied to another man, another move, another wedding, and another promise that this time will be different. Faith may know Ty and may even approve of him, but approval does not erase timing, and timing is the part that makes this so uncomfortable, because Lisa is not talking about slowly rebuilding herself, staying grounded, and making decisions after the emotions cool down. She is talking about going back to Nigeria, marrying Ty legally, and starting a new life while Daniel is still loudly refusing to accept that he has lost her. And then Lisa gives away the detail that makes the whole situation feel even more complicated, because she admits that marrying Ty could help her stay away from Daniel. And that may sound honest, but it also reveals the danger at the center of the choice. Because if a marriage is partly being used as protection from another relationship, then the new relationship is already carrying damage from the old one before it even has a real chance to stand on its own. That does not automatically mean Ty is wrong for her, and it does not mean Lisa is wrong for wanting love after Daniel, but it does mean Faith has every reason to be afraid, because she has watched her mother turn emotional need into life-changing decisions before, and now she is watching it happen again with a different man, a different name, and the same urgent feeling that everything has to happen right now. Lisa tells Faith she can slow down the wedding, but even while saying that, she is still clear that she plans to move. And that is the moment where Faith's warning starts to feel less like advice and more like a plea. Because slowing down the ceremony does not mean much if the bigger leap is still happening anyway. Meanwhile, Daniel is still in the background believing Lisa will change her mind. And the worst part is that his confidence does not come from nowhere. Because he knows their history, he knows how many times Lisa has been pulled back before, and he seems convinced that if he keeps pushing, the door will open again. So now the real question is no longer whether Lisa can say Daniel is over, because she has already said it. The real question is whether Lisa can live like it is over without using Ty as the wall between herself and Daniel. Because if she cannot stand on her own first, then Faith may be watching her mother escape one painful cycle only to enter another one with a softer entrance and the same dangerous speed. Lisa's choice leaves the tell-all with an ending that feels clear on the surface but unsettled underneath. Because she says she is done with Daniel, she says she wants a future with Ty, and she says this time is healthier because Ty is not treating her like a master. But the problem is that leaving one person does not automatically mean someone has broken the pattern that pulled them into that situation in the first place. That is what makes this ending so uncomfortable. Because Lisa's strongest moment is obvious. She finally rejects Daniel's control and makes it clear that he does not get to decide whether she stays, whether she loves him, or whether their so-called traditional marriage still controls her life. And after everything that came out about the pregnancy, the fear, the secrecy, and Faith being kept at a distance during one of the most serious moments Lisa went through, it makes sense why Lisa would want to close that door and never let Daniel walk back through it. But Daniel does not act like a man hearing a final answer. He acts like someone waiting for Lisa to change her mind. And that is what keeps the tension alive even after Lisa says the relationship is over. Because Daniel's confidence comes from their history, from the way Lisa has been pulled back before, and from his belief that if he keeps insisting they are still tied together, then maybe the emotional pressure will eventually do what words cannot. At the same time, Ty becomes the symbol of Lisa's new future, but he is still mostly a promise, not a proven reality. Because the audience has heard Lisa describe him as supportive, Faith knows him and approves of him, and Ty says there is no legal reason Lisa cannot move on. But none of that fully answers the deeper question of what happens when Lisa actually goes to Nigeria and has to live this relationship beyond phone calls, emotional rescue, and the rush of escaping Daniel. That is where Faith's fear matters most. Because Faith is not simply trying to block her mother from being happy, she is watching Lisa stand up to one man while possibly giving too much emotional power to another. And that is a painful position for a daughter to be in, especially when she has already seen how Lisa's choices can become bigger than the people around her are ready to handle. The truth is, Lisa can be right to leave Daniel and still be moving too fast with Ty. Because those two things can exist at the same time, and that is the part many viewers will argue about, since one side will focus on Lisa finally choosing freedom, while the other side will look at the legal wedding plan, the move to Nigeria, and the need to use Ty as distance from Daniel, and they will see warning signs all over it. So the ending is not really Lisa choosing Ty over Daniel, even if that is the headline people will remember. The real ending is Lisa standing at the edge of a decision that could either become a healthier chapter or another rushed commitment built on fear, relief, and emotional pressure. And maybe that is why the final image stays with Faith more than anyone else, because Daniel is still denying the breakup, Ty is waiting as the new choice, Lisa is saying she has found a healthier way forward, but Faith is the one left hoping her mother has not mistaken movement for healing. Because freedom only lasts if Lisa can stand in it without needing another relationship to prove she is finally free.